at the rate that it's, you know, and we're told to use uniform processes. Just check to what's happening today and take it back in time, and you will see what must have been billions of years ago. Well, they wouldn't have had anything billions of years ago at that rate. Did you know sometimes they strike oil and there's under 20,000 pounds per square inch of pressure? For some of you younger kids, that's like a giant zit, just go like this. Okay? Do you know they found out that rock can only hold pressures like that for less than 10,000 years? Why? What formed the oil and gas deposits, and why is it still under so much pressure? Something for us to consider. Here it says, oil and gas are from organisms once lived in the sea, changed by heat and pressure into oil. They took a ton of garbage and made a quart of oil, real good oil, in about 20 minutes under heat and pressure in a laboratory. Now, I believe back during the time of the Great Flood, there was a whole bunch of big critters, and we're going to talk about some of those big critters later on. Some have asked me, what about that big grasshopper? Oh man, that's just what one of the babies looked like before the flood of Noah. You ought to have seen what his grandpa looked like. Well, in about 3 weeks, we're going to show you what his grandpa looked like. Man, you got to come for when I do the one on the fossil record. We're going to show what life was like on Earth before the flood. Man, it's nothing like it was today. And you're going to be amazed, some of you, what you're going to find out about what life was like before the flood. So we're going to tell you about that. Now, Ray said next week I won't be here, but the week after that, we're going to talk about dinosaurs. I hope we can get a lot more kids in here for that dinosaur presentation, because this is things they're going to be taught in schools. They need to see the real truth about dinosaurs. And some of you are going to be very skeptical at the first when you start seeing the real truth about dinosaurs, but maybe not, because Ray's probably filled you in pretty good. But if you have all these great big animals and all this big vegetation too, real big vegetation, there was more landmass, smaller bodies of water, and lots of big vegetation. Also, you had people in there, the ones that didn't get on the boat, you know, Noah's boat. You drove over here tonight on some of your ancestors. Think about that the next time you're pumping gas, okay? Goodbye, Grandpa. Should have listened to Noah, should have got on the boat. This, if you think about 1 cubic foot of water, that's about 62 pounds. Now, if you stack up 10 of those, now you get 620 pounds of pressure. That's where all that pressure comes from. Now, if you take 100 of those, stack them up, now you got 6,200 pounds of pressure. That's a lot of pressure on top of you. Up above that, they had silt and rock and stuff. Rock is heavier than water. They had all this. Now, that's a lot of pressure. The Bible indicates, and we're going to look at this later on in one of our other sessions, that I believe there was some volcanic activity going on during the time of the Great Flood. That's heat and that's pressure. By the way, if the top 80% is sedimentary rock laid down by water mostly, the bottom 20% is igneous rock formed by heat and pressure, the evolutionist says that proved the Earth used to be molten lava after the Big Bang, and then it cooled down. Well, it might prove that maybe there was some volcanic activity going on during the flood and all these layers got laid on top of it. Do you know what? If all these layers were laid down by the Great Flood, we're going to look at that in a couple weeks, then you would have lots of heat down here. You'd have all this pressure. The higher the layer of sediment that laid down, you would be affected less by heat and less by pressure. Each layer then would, when they try to use radiometric dating on it, would read younger. See, just another thing that they don't factor in. When if you consider, they keep forgetting about the Great Flood and it messes them up every time. If they just factor in that flood, it'll explain a whole bunch of stuff to them. Ice core drillings in Greenland. Now, they have these things. This is they see this great big post hole digger? Actually, it's this ice core drilling machine. Post hole digger. Is that where they get PhD from? I thought about that. But post hole digger, these big ice core drilling machines, they drill down through the ice. Some of these are real big. These things. This is a lot bigger one here. But see where these rings here? They call those annual rings. Said when you have summer, then you have winter. It makes a dark ring in the ice, and you have a light ring. So they count up those, and they get up to hundreds of millions of years of ice there built up at the poles because of these annual rings. Here it says in Greenland and Antarctica, where the weather is consistently dry and very cold, glaciers are miles thick, but the annual rings are very thin. The deepest cores can measure over 10,000 feet at the poles. Anybody ever heard of the Lost Squadron? Anybody here? There's a few hands. Okay. Have a book about the Lost Squadron up here. See, back in the Second World War, in 1942, we were delivering some planes to Scotland. We had 2 P-38 fighters and 6 B-17 bombers we're taking to Scotland, our allies in the war. We're going to stop off at Iceland and then Greenland and then go on to Scotland and drop them off. However, there was bad weather. They had to turn back. One of the bases got closed. The next base was 2 hours away in Greenland, and they had 20 minutes of fuel. So they had to land on the ice. Now, they drilled dropped them supplies and things, but it took them 10 days to get them out by bobsled. But they left the planes there. So some people with a lot of money, they thought, you know, if we could go back there and just shovel off the snow and ice, gas them up and lubricate them, we could fly them back and have vintage aircraft. Boy, I bet they'd be worth a lot of money. So they tried 7 times. They had 7 expeditions over there that failed. The last one, they failed. They didn't get them out, but they finally found out where they were. The reason why they couldn't find out, now this is a picture of this is down in Middleborough, Kentucky. We're down, my wife and I are down there where you're going April. That's her down here in the corner. And they're putting one of these planes back together today. Down there, they're supposed to, in fact, this month, they're supposed to have it all done. And then they're going to be flying around to air shows and things. They'll be 80% of the original materials, but when the time they get them completed, completely restored, they're going to have about $3 million into it, I was told when I was down there. But the guy who has financed this one owns the bank and the McDonald's and a few other things around town, so he financed this one. See, the problem why they couldn't find them is because they were down under so much ice. You see, in 48 years, they're under 263 feet of ice. They went back a year later, when they finally got it out, it was under 5 more feet of ice in just 1 year. See, when you have from 1942 to 1990, that's 48 years, 263 feet below the surface, that's about 5.5 foot a year. You take 10,000 feet to the poles, divide that by 5.5 feet, well, that's only amounts to 1,824 years. Now that's, but you see, they found out they miscalculated a little bit because the deeper they get in the ice, the more pressure it is, they have finer layers. They said, well, you can probably count for the whole thing in about 4,400 years, all the ice at the poles. Not hundreds of millions of years of ice. But here's an article in Scientific American a couple years ago, still calling them annual layers. But now they know they're from warm spells and cold spells. It warms up and then it cools off and it makes another ring in the ice. In Michigan, we have about 20 warm spells and cold spells every week. You know, so it changes so quick. But one guy was talking about a snowstorm came in there and on the front of his vehicle over there built up like 18 inches of ice, snow and ice, in just a couple hours, and it had like, you could see like layers in it, where it layered itself in just a couple hours. Oceans today are 3.6% salt. At the rate that the erosion is depositing salt into the oceans today, you can go from fresh water to salt water in less than 5,000 years. Now, I think before the Great Flood, it was all fresh water, and then a lot of the salt got washed into there from the Great Flood. But now, did you know the erosion rates today? At the current erosion rates, all the continents should erode flat in 14 million years, excuse me. Well, they haven't yet. If it's been here 4.6 billion years, how come they haven't eroded flat? In fact, we have rocks that they've dated 300 times older than that, still above sea level. So using uniform processes, we're running into some problems here. If you just take those uniform processes backwards, we're not getting millions of years somehow. Short period comets, now they're only supposed to last 10,000 years or less because they make their shorter passes around the sun. They're made up of snow and ice, a little bit of dirt mixed in. They're 300 or 400 degrees below zero inside. But when they pass closer by the sun, they lose part of their mass. And so these are ice particles actually in relation to the sun. Now, they should be all gone in about 10,000 years, but we still got a whole bunch of them still going strong. And they found no evidence anywhere of any new ones being formed. Now, one fellow named Oort, back here a few years back, they had this Oort cloud. He said it was out there behind this galaxies, and they're spitting out a few every now and then. But then he found he made some miscalculations in his figuring, so there's no evidence of it happening anyway. So where did they come from, and why are they still here? Because they should be gone by now, if it's been billions of years.